This is Sarah Foye, and I am a member of Team Titan and a friend to Cure CMD, and I'm here with Chase Phillips, who is our speaker for this session. So I'm going to be turning it over to Chase and ask you to tell me about the path that led me to the work that you do.
Yeah, thanks so much, Sarah. It's a pleasure to do this. I love getting this information out to families. So for me, the path that led me to helping advise families who have loved ones with disabilities of all kinds is really deeply rooted in my own personal life. I was born with a neurological birth defect, spina bifida. And you can't see in this video, but I walk around with crutches. I use a wheelchair. And so I've faced a lot of the challenges that families go through. And so, for me, growing up, I knew I always wanted to help people. And this was a wonderful opportunity because I was always interested in personal finance as well. And I realized very early on that I could help people with their money, and I could help families who have had a similar path as me. And so I've been doing this work now since 2008, so 13 years, and it's a real privilege. My conversations go way beyond money sometimes, and that's a lot of fun. Whether we're talking about PT or orthotics or, protecting skin, all sorts of different things that go way beyond money. Makes my job a lot of fun as I'm helping families with their money and to plan for the long haul for their loved ones.
And I'll just give my own personal experience is that this is not the first time I've met Chase, and he spoke at the 2017 SciFam conference, and I was just so fascinated with the information that he was talking about with planning. And my family was at a point of transitioning a young person towards adulthood, and so my family met with Chase, and I just found it so extremely helpful, and I thought you spoke in a way that I could understand. And I also felt that your personal life experiences was something that you could really relate to our family. So I just am very grateful that you're here to be able to talk to our families. So thank you. Just thinking about special needs family, what kind of special considerations do families with members with special needs face? And how is this kind of different than planning for a typical family?
Yeah, so it's a great question. The thing about it is, when you're talking about financial planning for loved ones that have special needs, the biggest difference from planning for those families versus your typical family is that we're really planning for two generations at one time. We have to make sure that from a retirement perspective, mom and dad are going to be okay. Because in many cases, if mom and dad aren't okay, their loved ones aren't okay, right? And then at the same time, we're planning for either a child or a child transitioning into adulthood, or in some cases, an adult. And so we need to keep the planning focused on really retirement for three: mom, dad, and the loved one. And so the time horizon is a lot longer. Well, normally I'm planning for a retirement time horizon maybe from age 65 to 95. Well, we need to make sure that there's resources available, not just to age 95 for mom and dad, but another 40, 50 years beyond that, because, right, hopefully our kids are going to continue to thrive without us. And after all, it comes down to the dollars and cents. I mean, special needs families spend on average $30,000 to $60,000 more per year than your typical family.
Wow.
So it takes planning ahead and understanding what resources are available to make it all work. And then finally, families are overwhelmed. I mean, I saw this with my parents. You're going to PT, you're going to OT, you got IEPs with the school. Sometimes you're fighting the school system. You're trying to get what you need. That the longer term planning, which is what really this special needs planning is, it takes the back seat to today. And that's understandable, but we still feel the weight and the stress of thinking about what the future is going to hold for our loved ones. You know, we want to give them the tools to thrive, but at the same time, we need to make sure that we are preparing if they need to continue to need our support, even when we're gone as parents. So it's a lot. It's a lot for families to take on.
So that's why we have great experts like you.
Well, we just try to make it simple and create clarity. And then once you get those two things out of the way, knowledge is power, and we can go and execute the plan. And everyone always feels better when we're executing.
I just from my own personal experience with this kind of planning with you, that thinking of the 2-generation approach was eye-opening, and also having a plan in place it became from this sort of intangible worry to we actually got a binder and like here's the plan, and whatever your level of plan is, and there are all different kinds of levels of plans, but it was such a peace of mind. And absolutely true that life gets busy and this can often get pushed to the back burner. So it's so great that this talk is part of this conference and putting it on the radar of a lot of families. So one of the things that you talk about and talked about with our families, the 4 pillars of special needs planning. So could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, the 4 pillars are, I think, really a good way to stay organized, because these 4 pillars are what I consider the 4 most important topics of this longer term planning. And I do a lot of outreach and education on these 4 topics. Each one of these topics could be their own session. So I'm going to go over them very briefly, but as an audience, if you're watching this and you're going to write something down, I would write these 4 items down, and I'm going to go through them for you. All right. So what are the 4 pillars? How do we make sense of all this? And here's I think is a good way to do it. All right. So the 4 pillars are government benefits. Pillar 2 is legal planning. Pillar 3, family communication. Pillar 4, financial planning. So GLFF. I wish I had a fancy term or acronym for that. We're in a world of acronyms. I don't have one, but it's government benefits, legal planning, family communication, and financial planning. Okay, so what are these? All right, so first one, benefits, government benefits. The benefit system has come a long way, and it has a long way to go. But I think every family needs to be aware of the benefits that are going to be available to help their loved one. And so when I think about categorizing benefits, I think broad first, and then I get narrow, right? So broad first, what benefits are available at the federal level? Okay, so very high level, you have supplemental security income, which is a monthly dollar amount that your loved one would receive. For most families, it starts at age 18. And right now, in 2021, that dollar amount's a little under $800 a month. And that's a federal program. And with SSI, qualifying for SSI, you get qualification for Medicaid, which is a federal health insurance program that's administered by each of the states. And so as a family, you want to have an understanding of how you apply for these benefits and the nuances of what they are between each of the states. Then at the state level, you have other programs. A lot of times they're called waivers or Medicaid waivers. And these are different state by state, but these are programs that can provide supplemental resources and for things like assistive technology, for housing, for respite care, different types of therapies. And so a lot of times Medicaid's the barrier of entry for these Medicaid waiver programs. And so a lot of times the waiting lists, because there are waiting lists, they start and you can apply for them not at age 18, but sometimes sooner than that. So I tell every family, get very familiar with the nonprofits that are part of your locale. They will likely be very familiar with the Medicaid waiver programs that are applicable in your state or in your community. And then getting more specific, there are different grants and micro grants available, at different nonprofit groups, within different parent groups. A lot of times they're smaller amounts, But you want to have a very good understanding of what's available in your community. And that's why I say network, network, network. Talk to parents, get to know people. I mean, we've got parents that are now donating property so that group living situations can be built up, so that our loved ones can live independently with all of the resources that they need. Families are getting really creative with this stuff. So network, 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 talk to others, and you'll be amazed at all of the nooks and crannies of resources you can find. So benefits are key. Now, pillar 2, legal planning. I would say this up with benefits is as important as anything else, because legal planning really, as parents, there has to be a game plan for when you pass. What happens to your assets? Where will your assets go? Your legal planning is going to provide those instructions when you're gone. You don't want somebody else providing those instructions for you. You don't want the state providing those instructions for you. You want to have those items written down. And so when we talk about legal planning, particularly related to benefits, doing proper legal planning will help protect those valuable benefits. Because unfortunately, and I'm talking about SSI specifically and Medicaid, these benefits are means tested. They were created many, many years ago. But if you have over $2,000 in your name as a disabled individual, you won't qualify for those benefits. And so proper legal planning will help one have assets for their benefit and still receive those critical benefits. And so you would meet with a special needs attorney, and they would educate you about something called a special needs trust. And a special needs trust is just a box that you put things in: assets, money, property. And that trust or box can be written a certain way so that you can have those assets for your benefit and not lose access to those very valuable benefits. Okay. So the legal planning is very key. And I would tell any family that if you have a loved one with a disability, it's especially important for you to have your legal planning done. Because if you don't, quite frankly, it's not fair to your loved one. It's not fair for them for you not to have very specific instructions about how assets should pass. So for anybody that doesn't have the legal planning done, give yourself, say, what are we in May? You have until the end of the year. Get your ducks in order. Legal planning is key.
Just one thing I wanted to jump in is that some people think, oh, well, maybe I'll get to this was a transition to adulthood plan. So maybe when my kid's 17, I'll start thinking about this. And some of these programs have a period, what they call a look back period, that's up to 5 years. So it's kind of important to get this started thinking about and educating yourself early before it's now.
Yeah, you don't want to scramble. And I mean, COVID and the environment that we're living in has brought this very front and center for folks. We don't know what tomorrow brings. And we want to make sure that we've prepared adequately. And the earlier you start planning, the better. And you can build flexibility into your plan. A lot of families ask me, they say, Chase, we don't know what the future holds. Our kids are going to be independent. I say, absolutely. We can build flexibility into the plan so that if they need benefits, we know what to do. We've got the proper structures in place. And that's really key. Flexibility is important. And a good attorney, a good special needs attorney, is going to know how to build that into your documents, which I think is fundamentally important.
So it kind of sounds like preparing for the worst, but being optimistic and aiming for the best.
Yeah, absolutely. We're trying to get our loved ones to thrive. We're giving them all the tools they need to live their best, most independent life. In a lot of cases, they're not going to need mom and dad, and we'll get to that. We'll get to that point in a second. All right. So the second two pillars, family communication is key. I mean, you have to think about who's going to be in your loved one's life when you're gone. How much assistance are they going to need? Is it going to be a sibling? Maybe. That's a big responsibility, right? It's a big responsibility for the sibling. Are they the right person to be kind of an advocate for your loved one? What about grandparents that want to help? What about other family members that want to help? Do they know how to properly leave money to your loved one? You know, again, benefits are so key, and setting up the right structures like a special needs trust is so important. If a grandparent leaves money to your loved one directly while they're receiving benefits, they could lose their benefits. So as you plan, you need to educate those around you about the planning that you're doing, right? And the other thing that I think is really important for families to do is to put together what's called a letter of intent. And all that is a working biography and instruction manual for your loved one. It goes over their passions, their interests, their day-to-day schedule. It goes over, you know, what they want their life to look like. And so that document can be shared for anybody you expect to be in your loved one's life. And that is just so key, because as a parent, you have very big shoes to fill. Very big shoes to fill. And so if you want somebody to kind of have a fighting chance to help fill those shoes, you want to have these items written down. And I love it when, after all, it's your loved one's life. If they can, be involved in writing that document. It's very critical. So one thing I suggest all families do is just record your day as you go through it. Take a legal pad, got one right here. Take your legal pad, just write your day down as you go through it. There are things you do that are probably second nature, right? Like for me, I wear braces on my legs. I have to check my skin. As a youngster, I'm not going to be, my parents did that. So having that stuff down is really, really important.
Yeah, I remember doing that letter by your encouragement, and you forget, especially for families with very unique and special needs, you forget all the things you do on a daily basis that somebody just jumping in cold could be overwhelming. And so I remember we did draft that and work on that, and I probably should revisit it.
Yeah, well, hey, all these documents are drafts, working drafts of themselves. So, reviewing it annually is I think ideal. Some folks do it on their kid's birthday. I don't know, don't do it. Have fun, eat the cake. The next day, sit down for 45 minutes and update it accordingly. So
I like that idea.
the communication, though, is it just sharing the planning that you've done and getting that information and thinking about what the next generation of circle of support looks like is very important. And I get it. Easier said than done sometimes. And it takes some thought. But having a plan that's not perfect is definitely better than not having a plan at all.
I also think that communication keeps out any surprises, because you would hate to be in an urgent situation or a change in life circumstances, and then people are surprised with what the plan was, so that people are just know what to expect.
Yeah, no question about it. When we're having to scramble to get things done, it's possible, but it's not ideal. And then the final pillar is financial planning, the dollars and cents of it. I mentioned that, families that have challenges like ours, it costs more. There are more things to worry about. And so families ask, where do we start? And having an actual plan is important. And the first step to that is to make sure mom and dad are okay. So, I spend time doing financial planning and modeling cash flow projections for parents to make sure they're on track. And then I pay very specific attention to how much will be left over in their estate. And from there, we can start to understand how much we're going to need to fund and do a special needs trust down the road. So it takes some planning. And to that end, I find that a lot of families, sometimes they don't know what their monthly spending rate is. And I think that is very important, because it's two parts. It's mom and dad, and you have expenses for your loved one. Record those expenses, track them. Nobody likes to budget. It's homework. It is. But it is important to get that information down so that you can pinpoint what you're going to need, but also how much your loved one's going to need.
Yeah, and I think that, oh, excuse me, it's so great because I chuckled when you said budget because it was when we did this planning process, it was comical in not a great way of us trying to actually figure out how much money we spent per month.
Yeah.
And we did end up putting a lot of work into it and figured a couple different ways. And there's actually some nice tools, for example, on banking apps and things like that can help, but it really is important.
Yeah, well, it's hard sometimes because again, you're worried, you're going to the next appointment, you're taking care of today. Budgeting's kind of forethought, right? And benefits are part of that too, because if you understand, okay, I've got this benefit paying for that, I've got Y benefit paying for this. Okay, and that becomes part of the cash flow equation too. But one kind of way you can kind of judge, okay, how am I doing? What's the ballpark? Is understanding how much you can take from your savings or your assets or your investments each year. And so we coach families a lot on this. And, depending upon the age, somewhere between 3 and 5% per year can be spent from your asset base. So, for example, if your loved one has a $50,000 a year need, that's at least about $1 million we need to set aside for them, right? $1 million, 5% of that is 50,000, right? So for every 50K needed, you need to have about $1 million set aside. And that's an overwhelming number for a lot of families.
Yeah.
I get it. Who just has an extra $1 million laying around? So that's when we get into, again, benefits. It's when we get into insurance. Insurance is an asset. About 70% of special needs families use permanent life insurance or whole life insurance as a way to fund a special needs trust, because they say, Chase, I'm going to need my money for my retirement. There might not be enough left. And then we have this insurance conversation where we can create a lot of money by putting in a little bit of money. Understanding the savings tools. We're going to get into ABLE accounts, but the planning for the money and the dollars and cents is important. So that's the fourth pillar. So again, government benefits, legal planning, family communication, and financial planning.
And for this audience, there may be a whole range of spectrum of budgets from smaller size budgets to very large budgets, but regardless of the size of the budget, this planning is important.
Oh, no question about it. And you can get there no matter where you're starting. And that's an exciting endeavor for me because I see people of all different positions do this and navigate it.
So you mentioned about savings tools. So what kind of tools are available or beneficial for families with a special needs individual?
We talked about special needs trusts, and special needs trusts are, again, an entity that can accept assets, but they do have some limitations, right? They are taxable. Right? And so over the years, families have been talking about how can we have a tax efficient instrument for people who have disabilities who are also receiving benefits separate from the trust. And so a few years ago, legislation was passed where ABLE accounts, ABLE, ABLE accounts were formed. And this was a very revolutionary thing, not intended to replace the special needs trust, and that's very important, and I'll explain why. But ABLE accounts are now a way for people with disabilities who are receiving benefits to save money in a tax efficient way. So let me explain. So any dollars that go into an ABLE account, they're funded with post-tax dollars. So you earn money, you're taxed on it, it goes into your checking account. From there, you can put money into this ABLE account. The ABLE account can be invested just like an IRA or a Roth IRA or a 529 education account. And the earnings on that money grow free of taxes. And so a family can put $15,000 a year, that's the cap, into an ABLE account each year for the benefit of their loved one. And these accounts can be used with a great amount of flexibility. So as long as the assets are used for the benefit of the beneficiary, in this case, your loved one with the disability, the money comes out free of taxes. So the money can be used for trips and for school and for housing, for assistive technology, really anything that's going to benefit your loved one. Thankfully, the rules were very broad about what could be spent on. So it's like that college account, that 529 account, but a lot more flexible. $15,000 a year. Now, here's another really, this was a latest development as of the last few years, but there's now the Able to Save program. So in addition to 15,000, if your loved one is working and earning money, and the world's changing, people with disabilities are getting awesome jobs and thriving and living awesome lives. Those individuals can save an extra amount of money on top of that 15,000. As of right now, it's about $12,000. It's a little over $12,000 that they can put in on top. And so before, if you receive benefits, you can't put money in a 401k. You can't put money into an IRA. You can't put money into a Roth, but you can put money into that ABLE account. And so it's a very important tool that is finally available for people with disabilities to have some tax efficiency to their savings.
So that means that if you're applying for or on means tested benefits, then they don't consider the amount of money that's in your ABLE account.
Yeah, exactly.
Got
They're
it.
exempt. Yep.
Great.
Just like the money in the trust. Now, here's why it doesn't replace a trust. Okay. ABLE accounts have a cap. In addition to the 15K a year, there's a $100,000 cap. So if the money goes above 100,000, the SSI benefits, that dollar amount we talked about earlier, supplemental security income, is temporarily suspended. So what you would have to do is spend money to get it back under that 100K limit, and then your benefits would start up again.
You could buy like a wheelchair van or something.
Yeah. That'll, yep. Yeah. Anybody who's bought, yeah. Very expensive. So you could get back under 100K really quickly with a nice wheelchair van. But that's a qualified purchase. Now, if you're receiving Medicaid, if you go over the $100,000 limit, Medicaid's not affected. And so the overall balance is, depending upon the state, but it's around $500,000, between $400,000 and $500,000. But still, the trust account is what's going to be receiving much, larger, inheritances, lifetime support money. And so one thing that I just kind of want to briefly mention is, how do we think about ABLE accounts and trust accounts? What do we use for which? And what's that framework really look like? And I think this could be talked about a little bit more, quite frankly. So when you're planning, you're the person who, we're planning for, will probably have 3 buckets. We'll have a small bucket, a medium-sized bucket, and a big bucket. And so what will each of those be used for? So small bucket, also known as a representative payee account. That's where those SSI checks will be deposited to. It cannot go over $2,000. So it's like a checking account. And that can be used to pay for items for your loved one, but you can't accumulate money there. So the ABLE account, in a lot of cases for families, is a spillover. If the SSI checks are coming in and you can't spend them fast enough, that money could go into the ABLE account. And then you have ABLE. It's got some tax benefits. It can be used to purchase a lot of different things. It can be used to give your loved one financial independence because they can control it if they want to. So that's your intermediate term bucket. And then you have your third bucket, which is the trust. That's your bigger bucket. That's the money that will be the safety net to help support your loved one for the rest of their life. That's going to be the bucket that becomes the beneficiary of your retirement accounts or of your life insurance policies or from any other assets, maybe the proceeds from your house if you sell it. So that's the framework that you can think about. Rep payee, ABLE account, special needs trust.
Got it. The other thing I was going to mention is, you talked about some of these different rules are different by state. And I also know, like, different by country, and there's a broad range of attendees at SciFam. So the things we're talking about are mostly US based or US focused, but there may be similar types of plans on an international basis. I didn't know if you wanted to touch on that.
Yeah, well, benefits, even in this country, they can differ county by county, state by state. Even some of the ABLE programs have their nuanced differences, right? So that's why I encourage for, wherever state, engage with the great nonprofit organizations in your state. Engage with the great special needs attorneys in your state and the great financial planners in your state. Country by country, of course, the rules are going to be dramatically different country by country. Now, I focus on the U.S. That's where my practice resides. So I'm not up to date on what the rules are in France or in South America or anywhere else. But the sooner you can get to advocates, and all of these places are going to have advocates and good nonprofit organizations, that's going to be your key. And talk to other parents.
Yeah, I learned so much from my state. They had two groups for parents and with people with different needs, and they host webinars all the time, and even pre-pandemic. And they also would have like a family resource fair one time per year where you could go and talk to people. And I learned so much, and it really helped. And then the planning that we did with you, and it really just helped to have this worry about like what's going to happen to, oh, it's this, and then it's this, and it's this, and I have this plan in place, and I'm moving towards this, even if I'm not there now. Maybe my budget is, I'm not at that, my goal yet, but working towards a plan. So
Yeah.
I really just, I 100% agree with you, is talking with other parents and local resources and other advocacy networks. I learned so much, and that's really where we got to,
Yeah.
where we are. And my son's, young adult now.
Yeah. Step by step planning, little by little.
Yeah.
And expect change.
I encourage every family watching this to reach out to a special needs planner that they have. Like Chase has a very specific experience and perspective, and also the technical and financial expertise and of the 4 pillars and everything. And if you wanted to connect to Chase, you could email scifam@curecmd.org. That's scifam@curecmd.org, and we would connect you with him as a resource. So got a lot of information, the pillars, the savings, budget for every level of person, and just really appreciate that. Any final things you'd like to mention?
Yeah, well, and thank you again. I think, we talked a lot about how parents can help, but like, after all, I'm disabled myself, and the world is changing to the fact that people with disabilities are doing awesome things, are living independently, are making their own strides with working and creating their own wealth. And if you're watching this, and you can do it, and the younger you are, the easier it is to do. And I'll leave you with a very inspiring formula. The power of compounding interest is very important. So even if you're not making a lot of money, you can turn it into a lot of money with time. So here's one very interesting piece. Every dollar a 20-year-old saves and invests can turn into about $88 at age 65, assuming average market returns. That's a very inspiring thing when you say it doesn't take a lot of money. If we can have some forethought to have money in the future, and that money, well, money is not happiness, but it can give you freedom. And the world's opening up to the fact that the benefits are getting better, the jobs are getting better, the jobs coaching and planning is getting better. So we have a very bright future. So keep that in the back of your mind, and stay positive, and ask for help. There's a lot of people out there that want to help. I'm one of them.
Those are great tips. That's wonderful. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you again.